All right, welcome back. Today we're continuing our RBT exam review with our latest RBT exam, where we're going through the next set of questions and breaking them down together. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. If you're looking for our proven study materials, please check out rbtexamreview.com. We've helped thousands of RBTs pass, and we hope you're next. We offer 3 practice exams, our study guide, and our famous combo pack. Questions, comments, let us know. As always, work hard, study hard. Let's get to our questions. Question 1. You take data for 10 minutes on your client. You observe your client flick his ear 1 minute after observation started. 5 minutes later, the client flicked his ear again. 4 minutes later, the client flicked his ear once more. What was the total IRT in this situation? First things first, it's a measurement question. We're looking at inter-response time. So let's define inter-response time. It's the time in between behaviors. So we know that. Now let's identify the behavior we're looking at. Well, we're looking at the behavior of the client flicking his ear. So we're going to try to find the IRT of flicking his ear. In other words, we're looking for the time in between responses of flicking ear. In this case, though, we're looking for a specific total IRT. So not individual inter-response times, but the total inter-response time. So if we're going to find the total inter-response time, how do we need to do that? Well, we need to gather all of our inter-response times in the scenario and add them together. So let's see. The first time our client flicks his ear is 1 minute into observation. Has any inter-response time occurred? No, because inter-response time goes from responses to responses. The first ear flick is our first response. Inter-response time is going to be the time that passes before our second response, which is going to be 5 minutes, because 5 minutes later, what does our client do? He flicks his ear again. So our first inter-response time is 5 minutes. So now we've got our second response. Let's look at the time in between the second response and the next response. Well, if you keep reading, 4 minutes later, the client flicked his ear once more. So between response 2 and 3 was 4 minutes. So response 1 to response 2 was 5 minutes. Response 2 to response 3 was 4 minutes. We add those up. What's our total? Our total is 9 minutes. If we were finding an average, our answer would have been 4.5 minutes, 9 divided by 2, but we weren't. We were finding total inter-response time. How we broke down this question is how you need to break it down when you're studying. If you do that over and over again, measurement questions like these are going to become very, very easy and very second nature. But when you're studying, make sure you put in the time and you break each individual component down. Identify the behaviors, identify the measurements, and then I'm looking for a total, an average. What does the question ask? Always the most important thing to identify. What is the question asking? In this case, they're looking for total inter-response time. It's going to be 9 minutes. 5 minutes plus 4 minutes equals 9. Which is the following represents the Premack principle. Eating green beans is aversive to the client. Whenever we get a term in our question, what do? Define it. It's going to make the question easier. So let's define Premack principle. Premack principle is using the opportunity to engage in a preferred activity as reinforcement for engaging in a non-preferred activity. Remember, it's essentially the opposite of a high P request sequence, right? With a high P, low P, we're doing all the high probability requests first and then low probability. Premack principle, we're going low preferred to high preferred, right? Premack principle, also known as Grandma's law. So we've defined it. Now the question becomes fairly straightforward. If we know green beans is the aversive, well, green beans is going to have them first, right? Because in the Premack principle, the preferred activity is the reinforcer. We want the non-preferred or the aversive to happen first. So we're looking for a scenario where the client or the learner has to eat green beans before they can do something else. So A, the client is allowed 20 minutes of video games before eating green beans. If we're using the Premack principle, are we going to use the preferred activity first? No, we're using it as a consequence. So if anything, these are going to be reversed, right? If you eat your green beans, then you get 20 minutes. B, the client is given a token for each green bean he eats. This is just simply a reinforcement system or a token system. It is not the Premack principle. The client doesn't get to engage in any activity. He's just being reinforced for eating green beans. So be careful there. C, the client is allowed to eat broccoli instead of green beans. We're not looking for alternatives or choices here. Okay, we want them to eat the green beans. We're using the Premack principle specifically so they will eat green beans. We don't want them to escape. We don't want to give them an alternative. We want the green beans to be eaten. So D, the client has to finish his green beans before playing video games, is the Premack principle. What's the preferred activity? Video games. It's the reinforcer or the consequence for finishing his green beans, the aversive. So which of the following represents the Premack principle? It's going to be D. The client has to finish his green beans before playing video games. You take your RBT exam and pass on the first try. As you walk to your car, you write down all the questions you remember in your phone. Your friend is planning on taking her RBT exam next week, and you want to help her study. Are you able to share the questions with her? Fairly straightforward ethical question. Most ethical questions are common sense and repeats of other ethical questions because the ethical code is clear, right? So, your first instinct, do you think you'd be allowed to share questions they asked you on the exam? Well, of course not, right? The BACB does not want you sharing real questions from the exam. Can you help your friend study? Yes. Can you give them tips and advice? Yes. But you can't plagiarize and copy word for word questions that you saw and then pass them on. We frown upon that. So, are you able to share the questions with her? A, yes. The more you help future RBTs, the better. That is true. You want to help your friends become RBTs. We want more RBTs in the field, but we do not do that by cheating or plagiarizing questions. B, no, you're not an authorized test provider. Well, that is true, but that doesn't really have anything to do with sharing the questions. That's not why you can't share the questions, because you're not the test provider. You can't do it because it's unethical. C, no, you're not allowed to share official RBT questions. Yes, C is the right answer. Unethical. It might be illegal depending on how they view it. Don't do it. Okay. Help your friends. Don't share real questions. D, no, you must wait a month before talking about the exam. Not true. Okay. Don't share anything specific about the exam. Just bottom line. Answer here is C. No, you're not allowed to share official RBT questions. If the client's criterion is set at 90% for 4 consecutive sessions, which of the following sets of data contains 7 trials to criterion? Now let's be careful here. Another measurement question. Let's define trials to criterion. With trials to criterion, you're setting a criterion or a goal. And then once we hit that goal, we're going to count how many trials it took. And that will be our trials to criterion. For instance, if my goal is to reach 100% a single time, and it takes me 5 tries to get 100%, my trials to criterion are 5. Okay. In this case, it's a little more tricky, right? Because we set a criterion at 90% for 4 consecutive sessions. So we need our client to engage in the target behavior or exhibit the target behavior 4 consecutive sessions at 90%. But the question is asking for a data set that contains 7 trials to criterion. So it's not enough that we just have 4 in a row at 90%. We need one with 7 trials to criterion, meaning it's going to take us 7 trials to reach our criterion. A, 80%, 90%, 90%, 30%, 30%. So you can eliminate A. Why? Well, we don't even meet the criterion, right? We need 4 consecutive 90%. We don't get that with A. B, 70%, 90, 90, 90, 90, 50, 60. Now, we did get 4 consecutive 90%, but what's the issue? Well, it only took us 5 trials to get there. This set of data, there's only 5 trials to criterion. We need a set of data with 7 trials. C, 10, 30, 90, 40, 50. Same problem with A. We don't have 4 consecutive sessions at 90%. So we have D, 10, 30, 80, 90, 90, 90, 90. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've met our criterion, 4 consecutive sessions at 90%. It took us 7 trials to get there. Our trials to criterion is 7. Again, notice the difference between B and D. B, it only took us 5 trials to get there, but we're looking for a data set of 7 trials. D is when we meet our criterion and takes us 7 trials to get there. This is kind of a difficult question, okay? If you got this right, good for you. If not, don't worry. Just keep reviewing measurement, okay? You'll get there, right? That's why we practice. We learn from our mistakes. The biggest mistake you can make is trying to rush through questions. You want to miss questions, right? Up front. It's going to teach you. You're going to learn more from your mistakes than the ones you get right. When you do miss questions, make sure you thoroughly review that question. Why'd you get it wrong? Why'd you pick the answer? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The harder you work up front, the easier the test is going to be. Steph is teaching his daughter how to shoot a basketball. First step is getting the ball in the proper position, and the last step is taking the shot. If Steph first reinforces his daughter after she takes the shot, what type of chaining is he most likely using? Well, obviously a chaining question. So let's think about our types of chaining: forward, backwards, total. We also have a behavior chain interruption strategy. In this case, we have Steph teaching his daughter to shoot a basketball. We know the first step is proper position, last step is taking the shot. With forward chaining, when do you reinforce? You reinforce after the first step, and after the first and second, so on and so forth. With backwards chaining, you reinforce after the last step, and second to last, so on and so forth. Total task, you're teaching the whole chain. Behavior chain interruption strategy, you're interrupting the chain. When is Steph reinforcing? Well, he first reinforces his daughter after she takes the shot. Is the shot the first step or the last step? What's the last step? So is Steph using forward chaining? Well, no, because if it was forward chaining, Steph would first reinforce after the ball's in proper position. It's going to be backwards chaining because Steph is reinforcing after the last step. He's not teaching the whole chain. He's not interrupting the chain. He's reinforcing for the final step. Chaining questions should be very straightforward and very easy. Forward chaining is exactly what it sounds like. So is backwards chaining. So is total task. And so is behavior chain interruption. All right. Just make sure you practice it a decent amount. So when you get these type of questions, which are maybe a 2 or 3 on a difficulty scale, you don't have any issues with it. Evaluate the following scenarios. Which one offers the most objective description of what occurred? What do we mean by objective? Mean what actually happened. Not looking for an opinion. We're looking for what actually happened. Subjective or subjectivity would be, what is your opinion? What are your feelings? Objective is what has happened, nothing more. So we're looking at the following scenarios, and we're looking for an objective description of what occurred. A, it is uncomfortably hot in Vegas in the month of May. Now, hot in Vegas in the month of May could be objective depending on the temperature, but this word uncomfortably, I think May is rather comfortable in Vegas and other people do not. It's like people who live in places like Chicago or New York. They might think it's comfortable in January, and I think it's freezing cold, right? Hot is one thing. Uncomfortably hot is much more subjective. So we can probably find something a little more objective than A. B, people were whispering in the library during finals week. So we know it was finals week. We know we're in the library, and we can identify a whisper. Pretty much everybody can. B is much more objective than A. We're not talking about specific volume. We're just saying they were whispering. And whispering is pretty objective, at least more objective than uncomfortably. C, it is too unsafe to go outside and play today. Well, if you're a overprotective parent, you might believe it's too unsafe. If you're a 10-year-old boy, you might not. Okay. Too unsafe is subjective. And then D, that was the hardest exam that teacher has ever given. If you failed the exam or you took a long time, you might feel one way. But what if you aced the exam? What if you thought it was extremely easy? Hardest is subjective. So the most objective description is going to be B. People were whispering in the library during finals week. And this question is to just get you thinking a little more, okay? More applying, more critical thought, thinking about what we're trying to accomplish here, right? How do we want to define things? Objective, measurably, observably, right? Trying to eliminate opinion and subjectivity. People were whispering in the library during finals week tells me exactly what happened, right? Too unsafe, subjective. Hardest, subjective. Uncomfortably hot, subjective. The most objective description is going to be people were whispering in the library during finals week. Jane is walking through Target on a Sunday. As she walks through the school supplies section, she spots a calendar she thinks she'll like, so she walks over to grab it and put it in her cart. She takes it to self-checkout and buys the calendar. What is the consequence for grabbing the calendar? Consequence question, behavior question, ABC. Always think ABC, antecedent, behavior, consequence. So, behavior question. What behavior are we looking at? Well, we're looking at grabbing the calendar, specifically the consequence for grabbing the calendar. So, we're looking for something that comes after or immediately after grabbing the calendar. So, let's walk through our question. Jane is walking to Target on a Sunday, walks to the school supplies section, spots the calendar she thinks she'll like, walks over, and then grabs it. Okay, there's our behavior, right? Grabs it and puts it in her cart. So, what's the immediate consequence for grabbing the calendar? Well, calendar going in her cart, right? She puts it in her cart. She now has the calendar in her cart. It's really that simple, right? Don't get bogged down in behavior questions with all the other things going on. Be very narrow in how you analyze the question. We're looking at this one specific behavior and there's one specific consequence. Grabs it, puts it in her cart. Response, consequence. So, what is the consequence? A, Jane purchases the calendar. Maybe, right? But there's a long way between grabbing the calendar and going purchase the calendar. Okay. So that's not the immediate consequence, right? Because she hasn't yet purchased it. All that's happened is it's now in cart. Jane sees the calendar. Well, did that happen before or after grabbing the calendar? It happened before. That's going to be an antecedent, if anything. See, the calendar goes into Jane's basket. Yes, that is the immediate consequence for grabbing the calendar. And when we talk antecedents and we talk consequences, we're talking immediacy. Okay, so on the exam, remember that. We're talking immediacy. Jane leaves the school supplies section. Maybe not. Maybe she continued to browse. We're not really sure. Okay, it does say she takes it to self-checkout. Fine. But the immediate consequence is grabs it, puts it in her cart. What is the consequence for grabbing the calendar? C, the calendar goes into Jane's basket. Behaviors can be defined by which of the following two criteria? How do we typically define behavior? We've asked this question before, but it's so important that as RBTs, you know what you're looking for in behavior. So what are you looking for in behavior? Well, first and foremost, why did it happen? Function, right? Attention, escape, tangible, automatic. First and foremost, most important piece. Second, what does it look like? What is the topography? Those are our main two criteria, function and topography. So behaviors can be defined by which of the following criteria? A, functionally or subjectively. Functionally, yes. We just talked about subjectivity though, right? We don't want to be subjective. It's not your opinion. What happened? B, functionally or topographically. Functionally, absolutely. Why did the behavior occur? Most important part. Topographically, important as well. What does that behavior look like? Do we pick B and move on? No. We read all of our answer choices. C, topographically, yes, or verbally, no. Functionally or verbally, no. The best answer here, the right answer here, behaviors are defined by function, why it happens, escape, tangible, attention, automatic, and topographically. What does that behavior look like? Those are our two primary criteria for defining behaviors. Consequences are most likely to change behavior if they are delivered when. There's this idea of contiguity in behavior analysis where closeness matters. Proximity to the behavior matters. Antecedents or what happened right before the behavior. Consequences should happen immediately following the behavior. The closer the consequence is to the target response, the more power it has over it. Think about if you have a reinforcer and you wait 10 minutes to deliver the reinforcer. Think about all the other changes in the environment, all the other behaviors that might have happened in between those 10 minutes. You could be reinforcing anything. So, if you are delivering reinforcement, tokens, praise, anything, you want it to happen immediately. Consequences are most likely to change behavior if they're delivered A, right before the behavior. Do consequences come before the behavior? They do not. They come after. So we eliminate A. Consequences are most likely to change behavior if they are delivered B, immediately after the behavior. Yes. Contiguity, closeness matters. Consequences are most likely to change behavior if they are delivered 10 seconds after the behavior. No. 10 seconds is not as good as immediately. We want closeness. We want contiguity. D, none of the above. I'm not going to pick none of the above because B is the right answer. Finally, you are told to conduct ABC recording for the next 5 sessions. What would you record if you wanted to properly conduct ABC recording. Now, let's not miss this question. Okay. There's a tricky answer choice in here that throws people off. It's because they read too quickly and they just want to pick a choice and move on. We don't do that. We read all of our answer choices. We take our time. ABC recording, antecedent behavior consequence recording. Exactly what it sounds like, right? We record antecedents, we record behaviors, we record consequences. So, A, antecedents, behaviors, enforcers. Are we recording reinforcers with ABC? No, we are recording consequences. That specificity matters. Okay. It's not always going to be reinforcing whatever the consequence is. So B, antecedents, behaviors, consequences, is much more specific and much more accurate. Okay. We're not antecedents, behaviors, consequences. It's antecedents, behaviors. It's not antecedents, behaviors, reinforcers. It's antecedents, behaviors, consequences. Get specific. C, antecedents, duration, consequences. No, we're missing our behavior. D, setting events, behaviors, consequences. Setting events are technically antecedents, but they typically happen well before the actual behavior. With ABC recording, we're trying to find out exactly what happened right before the behavior. If we're conducting ABC recording for the next 5 sessions, what are you going to record? You're going to record antecedents, behaviors, consequences. All right, lovely. Thank you for watching. Please check out rbtexamreview.com. Like and subscribe. Like always, be back Wednesday with our practice question video. When you pass your exam, make sure you let us know to include us in our shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.